Hello, students of world history. Today's lecture is U4P4. We're talking about the kingdom of Aksum and then also some of the West African civilizations. The kingdom of Aksum, as you can see, is located on the Red Sea. It's really quite close to the Arabian Peninsula. It's really pretty close to Mecca that we talked about when we talked about the beginnings of Islam with Muhammad. And Aksum is a kingdom that maybe not very many people know about, but it develops, as you can see there, around 300 and has about a 400-year history before falling around 700. It is in the middle of a bunch of trade routes, and that's what really makes it stand out as a successful kingdom. It is on the Red Sea between Arabia and Africa, and it is a kind of ideal trade crossroad. You might remember how Mecca and the Arabian Peninsula was also a kind of center of world trade, with some of the trade routes going through the Arabian Peninsula, and how that that makes the Arabian Peninsula an ideal place for someone to be a middleman in. We had the same thing going on in India when we were talking about the Gupta Empire, that they were sort of middlemen between East and West. Well, Aksum is really a kind of middle kingdom or middleman between the rest of the world and African products or the African economy. And so things like silks and textiles from Asia, spices from Asia, are all coming from the east to the west through the Arabian Peninsula. And then you had a lot of different kinds of products coming up from Africa, things like salt, exotic animal parts like rhinoceros horn or elephant tusk, or different kinds of animal pelts, jewels, and then lots of gold. Gold is a thing that you find quite a bit in Africa. So these things are flowing in opposite directions, coming together in Aksum. And adding to that mix are some products from the Roman Empire or from Europe, things like glass and olive oil, wine. They're all coming together, all being traded. It becomes a very international kind of place and a very wealthy place for a good period of time. There is cultural diffusion going on with products, but there's also cultural diffusion going on with a mixture of African and Arab cultures. You also have these traders coming in from Rome or coming in from Persia and India and the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantium, all showing up here, all trading things. It becomes a very multi-ethnic and multicultural place. There was an early king, King Ezana, who adopted Christianity. Once again, kind of a cultural diffusion thing happening, coming down from the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire. The people of Aksum also had a kind of written language. They used a system of coinage, and they also came up with a way of using terraced farming to create successful agriculture in a place that was a little bit hilly. So they had a 300 or 400-year successful reign going on as a good kingdom, and then as Islam started to come out of the Arabian Peninsula around the year 600, 630, 640, 650, then you had Muslim people taking over the trade routes that the people of Aksum were benefiting from, and maybe cutting off those trade routes, and Aksum, no longer able to profit from that trade, started to decline. It continues on, though, to exist beyond that, and there are a number of Christian people in this part of Africa as well. It becomes eventually Ethiopia. Moving away from the far northeastern part of Africa, we go over to the western part of Africa and talk about three West African empires. These three West African empires, as you can see on the map, are all located just south of the Sahara Desert, and then they are north, and they are also a little bit west of some of the more dense rainforest parts of the geography of Africa. Much of this is on savanna land, as you can see, and they were all very successful, and they all had some similarities. They're all more or less in the same place, but I'll show you some other similarities that these West African empires have in common, and we'll go through them chronologically or by date. The first empire that comes here in the western part of Africa is the Empire of Ghana. Ghana emerges around the time that Aksum is falling, around the year 700 CE. And like all three of these empires, it centers on gold and the gold and salt trade. Gold coming up from Africa or being mined in Africa, and then being traded for salt that is found in the desert. There are people who are traveling through the desert, people who are mining or finding this salt and then bringing it. Salt is a very, very lucrative or expensive product for a long period of time. It's great for preserving foods. It's great for making foods taste good. People really were desperate for salt, and other people were very desperate for gold. And so this gold salt trade was something that made a lot of money for the people who were involved, and something that people wanted on both sides of the trading coin. The Islamic merchants who are crossing the Sahara Desert, as you can see, oftentimes doing that with camels, because camels are uniquely adapted to traveling through the desert. Those Islamic merchants are bringing things like cloth and weapons and manufactured goods from other places. And once again, the people of Ghana are trading, for the most part, gold for what they're getting. So with this gold salt trade, with this gold for other products trade that's going on, Ghana is able to get wealthy enough to dominate a number of other societies to form an empire. In the end, though, the Empire of Ghana is defeated by people from North Africa, Muslim people from North Africa, called the Almoravids. They come down around 1076 or so, and they take over Ghana. They don't just want to, let's say, trade for gold. They'd really rather get at the source of the gold, and that's what they were attempting to do. So that lasts for a couple of hundred years in that area. But around 1235 or so, a new kingdom, the kingdom of Mali, started to grow. Same kind of thing based on the gold and salt trade. And Mali becomes an empire under a very effective ruler by the name of Sundiata. Sundiata was able to, like many great leaders, conquer a bunch of the surrounding lands around Mali, extend Mali's borders, and then once he has conquered this territory, begin a period of peace and prosperity based on that gold salt trade. He wanted to make sure that his empire ran effectively, and so he had a very effective administration, or a bunch of people who worked for him, bureaucrats who were working for him, who were collecting taxes, who were dispensing justice, who were making sure that the state was running very smoothly. And in addition to that, he wanted to make sure that the economy was running well, and so he encouraged agriculture, a number of different kinds of agricultural products, and then also trade, not just the gold salt trade, but any kind of thing that they can trade across the Sahara Desert. Mali's most important leader, however, was a man by the name of Mansa Musa. He was, just like Sundiata, a very skilled military leader. He controlled the gold salt trade as well, but he really made quite a bit of money. He really got a lot of wealth from this gold salt trade, and he just had a lot of gold, as I'll tell you about here in just a minute. He also continued with this idea of administering the lands of Mali effectively by doing what we've seen a lot of leaders do, dividing his empire into provinces and making sure that each one of those provinces were ruled fairly and effectively by the people who were there. Now, Mansa Musa was known for being a devout Muslim, and he did one of the things that that is required of devout Muslims, which is to go on the Hajj to Mecca. And when he did that, he brought with him a lot of gold and seemed to just be giving the gold away, giving to people who were needy and so on, but just really spreading a lot of gold around on his whole way to Mecca and coming back. And people were just amazed by the amount of gold that Mansa Musa had. And some people even theorize or speculate that Mansa Musa was one of the richest people ever to have existed in world history. He has a couple of new mosques built. Once again, he's got a lot of wealth, one in Gao and one in Timbuktu. And Timbuktu became a very important site for Islamic scholars and religious leaders as well. So under Mansa Musa, there's just this flowering of wealth and a flowering of culture because of the gold salt trade. Mansa Musa, however, passes away eventually, and the Mali Empire weakened after his death. They didn't have one person who was able to hold things together quite in the way that Mansa Musa was able able to, or Sundiata had been able to. Some of the people who lived in the Mali Empire decided to break away from Mali and create a new empire called the Songhai Empire. But it's really quite similar in the sense that it is receiving a lot of wealth from that gold salt trade. And also, if we think of Mansa Musa as an Islamic leader, you have the leadership of the Songhai Empire also being Muslim. There was a man by the name of Sunni Ali who expanded the empire through conquest with a very professional military. There were really no other people who could stand up to him in Africa around that period of time. Later on, there was another leader by the name of Askia Muhammad who governed well after Sunni Ali's death, not so much as a conqueror, but more as a governor, and creating a very efficient tax system that was taking in a lot of the taxes necessary to make a successful state. And then once again, having good government officials who were fair, who were making sure that the state really ran effectively. Kind of like what happened with Ghana, you had people who came from North Africa, Muslim people from North Africa who took over the Songhai Empire, and they do so in 591. By this point in time, the people of North Africa were using gunpowder in order to fight their wars, and the people of Songhai didn't have that kind of technology yet, and that superior technology allows these Moroccan forces to bring the Songhai Empire to its knees. Well, that's it for the Kingdom of Aksum and these three empires that we find in West Africa. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I hope you do well on the lecture check. Thanks, and have a great day.